Nostradamus predicted the fall of these three countries by the end of 2025. Is it happening now? Somewhere beyond headlines and hashtags, a quiet storm is building. Not in the clouds, but in the fate lines of entire nations etched centuries ago by a man who saw too far ahead. Nostradamus, the enigmatic seer, left behind visions drenched in metaphor, fear, and fire. Among his prophecies, three nations he believed would face a reckoning by the end of 2025. Not through explosions, but through erosion of values, of stability, of trust. And here's the haunting part: you may be living in one of them, or your life may be intertwined with what happens when they fall. In this video from The Journey of Wisdom, we explore not just what Nostradamus said, but what it means for us right now, in a world that feels more fragile with every passing day. If you feel something shifting beneath the surface, you're not alone. Like, share, and subscribe, because this isn't just about prophecy, it's about the choices we make as history whispers to us once again. Number 1. Nostradamus and the prophecy. Among the enigmatic figures who have shaped the way humanity contemplates its fate, few hold as haunting a presence as Michel de Nostradamus, better known to the world as Nostradamus. Often painted as a mystic cloaked in shadow, he was not merely a poet of doom, but a man tormented by visions that refused to stay silent. These visions, scrawled in cryptic four-line verses called quatrains, have managed to outlive empires, religious suppression, and centuries of skepticism. Though many of his writings are often dismissed as poetic riddles or vague speculation, history has a way of returning to them when the world begins to echo their themes. And within his extensive body of work, more than 900 quatrains preserved in various volumes, lies one particular prophecy that remained buried in obscurity for generations. Unlike the widely published verses, this quatrain was never formally released in his lifetime, only surviving through fragmented copies in old European manuscripts. It wasn't until 1994, when it unexpectedly resurfaced at a Parisian auction, that it began stirring renewed interest among scholars and researchers. The quatrain speaks ominously of three pillars, once proud and unshakable, who shall fall by fire, flood, and fault before the rise of the double sun. A line like this, soaked in metaphor, naturally invites debate. But more importantly, it has invited analysis, especially in the context of our rapidly changing modern world. What are these three pillars? For years, the question lingered in scholarly circles. Yet in recent times, experts from diverse fields ranging from historians to political analysts, even former intelligence officers, have begun to align around a startling interpretation that these three pillars refer not to literal structures, but to three powerful nation-states, once symbols of global dominance, now grappling with escalating internal crises, geopolitical shifts, and environmental catastrophes that threaten to dismantle their foundations from within. These countries, once considered untouchable, are now increasingly fragile, economically unstable, socially divided, and environmentally vulnerable. And as the world stares down the closing stretch of 2025, many are beginning to wonder if this ancient prophecy wasn't just symbolic poetry, but a foresight into events that are beginning to materialize in real time. The imagery of fire, flood, and fault no longer feels like abstract metaphor when we consider the wildfires devastating entire regions, the floods displacing millions, and the political fault lines shaking the very identity of nations. The double sun, once thought to be an astrological reference, is now being interpreted through lenses as varied as climate science, astronomical phenomena, and even nuclear threat. So, in this episode from The Journey of Wisdom, we will take you deeper beyond the poetic phrasing and into the practical signs of unraveling. We will identify the three nations many believe are foreshadowed in this forgotten prophecy and ask the hard question, is their fall truly written in the stars? Or are we simply choosing not to heed the warnings written across the landscape of our time? The lines of Nostradamus may be ancient, but the implications feel closer than ever. Keep watching as the pieces begin to connect and the silence of centuries starts to speak once again. Number 2. Three nations in prophecy. 1. United States, land of the eagle. Let's talk about the first nation many believe Nostradamus warned about. The United States of America, often symbolized by the mighty eagle. In one of his most haunting quatrains, he wrote, "In the land of eagle's cry, twin flames rise and vanish in dusk. The house divided shall fall as kings whisper in foreign tongues." It's a verse that has sparked deep reflection, especially in recent decades. Many link the twin flames to the unforgettable tragedy of the 11th of September, the fall of the Twin Towers moment that didn't just destroy buildings, but shattered the illusion of American invincibility. In a single day, the world watched a powerful nation brought to its knees, not by armies, but by an unexpected blow that left deep emotional and psychological scars. But Nostradamus's words reach beyond a single event. His warning, "The house divided shall fall," echoes another great voice in American history. Abraham Lincoln, who once warned that a nation divided against itself cannot stand. What happens when division becomes the norm, not the exception? What happens when disagreement turns into distrust, and distrust into outright hostility? Today, as we move closer to the end of 2025, that question feels more urgent than ever. The division within the United States is no longer just political rhetoricists visible in our conversations, our news, our families, and even within ourselves. It's no longer left versus right. It's facts versus misinformation, unity versus tribalism, democracy versus cynicism. People live in separate realities shaped by different sources of information, different fears, and different visions of the future. Nostradamus warned of kings whispering in foreign tongues, a cryptic image that many today associate with concerns about foreign interference in democratic systems, especially through cyber manipulation, disinformation campaigns, and the invisible hand of global influence pulling the strings behind the curtain. How much of what we see, hear, and believe is truly our own thinking? How often do we question the sources of the content that shapes our decisions? As individuals and as a society, these are the questions we can no longer afford to ignore. But the prophecy doesn't stop at social and political decay. It moves into the natural world, where the signs are just as alarming. In the past few years, we've witnessed the United States ravaged by natural disasters at a pace and intensity we've rarely seen before. Entire communities wiped out by wildfires that rage with uncontrollable force, hurricanes that form more quickly and strike more fiercely, droughts stretching across states, threatening crops, water supplies, and the everyday lives of millions. Infrastructure, once reliable, now buckles under pressure from both age and environment. Bridges collapse, power grids fail, and systems once thought strong show signs of decay. Nostradamus mentioned a fault breaking apart the land, a mysterious phrase that some today interpret as a warning of literal seismic disaster. Scientists are increasingly concerned about areas like the New Madrid Fault Zone and the Cascadia Subduction Zone regions, overdue for major earthquakes that could cause devastation on an unimaginable scale. Could this be what he saw? And if so, how do we prepare for something that can't be stopped, only endured? In every direction, the United States stands at a crossroads, a fractured society, a shaking earth. Foreign whispers in the digital shadows, the slow, silent erosion of trust, both domestically and internationally. The first pillar, as some scholars call it, is still standing, but it trembles. And that's perhaps the most sobering part of this entire vision. According to Nostradamus, the collapse of such powers would not be sudden or loud, but ghostly and quiet, noticed only when it's already too late. So the question is not just whether the prophecy is true, but whether we're paying attention to the signs while there's still time to change course. Are we willing to reflect on where we are as a nation and ask, what can we do, not just as Americans, but as fellow human beings, to prevent division from becoming destruction? Before we continue to explore the next two countries Nostradamus may have warned about, take a moment and reflect. What do you think is this prophecy coming true before our very eyes? Do you feel these warnings resonate with what's happening around us today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice is part of this conversation. And if there's one lesson we can carry forward from this segment, it's this. Even if the future feels uncertain, awareness is power. Recognizing the cracks doesn't mean we're doomed. It means we still have a choice. A divided house may fall, but a house restored, even slowly, can still stand strong. What future will we choose to build together? 2. Turkey. The Crescent, draped in black. Let's now turn our attention to the second country many believe Nostradamus warned about: Turkey, the nation symbolized by the crescent moon. In one of his lesser-known but deeply chilling quatrains, Nostradamus wrote, "The crescent shifts, draped in black veil, blood in the streets of the oldest city. The east shall shake, and from within the lion devours its own." These words, filled with mystery and sorrow, have long been associated with the broader Middle East, but more recent interpretations point specifically to Turkey, a country standing at the crossroads of East and West, both geographically and culturally. For centuries, Turkey has been a keystone of civilizations, from the mighty Ottoman Empire to the modern secular republic. But today, its political fabric seems increasingly strained, its economy teeters on the edge, and the spiritual weight of these prophecies begins to feel uncomfortably real. Istanbul, often referred to as the oldest city, a city that once served as the capital of empires, has in recent years become a focal point of protests, authoritarian crackdowns, and growing civil unrest. The line, "The lion devours its own," may sound poetic, but many believe it reflects something far more disturbing: the purge of journalists, academics, military leaders, and political dissidents. Is this a sign of a nation slowly turning inward, consuming the very foundations that once made it strong? And what happens when a society, rich in culture and history, begins to lose the freedom of thought and expression that once defined it? As you reflect on this, consider this powerful quote from the Buddha. "Three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth." In the context of Turkey, what truths are we still unwilling to face? The symbol of the crescent, proudly displayed on the national flag, now being draped in black veil, is a haunting image. Could it represent not just political grief, but a spiritual and cultural mourning, as well as a collective sorrow over the loss of identity, stability, and hope? Adding to this picture is a more literal danger. Turkey sits atop the volatile North Anatolian fault, and seismologists have been warning for years that a catastrophic earthquake is not a matter of if, but when. Istanbul, with its dense population and aging infrastructure, would be at the center of such a disaster. So now we must ask ourselves, if political unrest continues to rise, if the economy keeps slipping, and if the earth itself begins to shake, what will remain of this proud and ancient land? How much more pressure can one nation bear before it begins to break? Some might say this is all coincidence, that history always has moments of chaos, but as the pieces begin to align, prophecy, politics, nature, and conflict, it becomes harder to ignore the pattern. Nostradamus warned not of sudden explosions, but of slow unravelings, quiet falls, and inner corruption. And so we must ask, are we witnessing Turkey's transformation in real time as a rising power, but as a country slowly consumed by its own storms? This is not about fear, it's about awareness. Because, as the Buddha also taught, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. What spiritual lessons are we being called to learn from this moment? Are we watching a prophecy unfold? Are we seeing the consequences of collective choices compounded over time? Before we move on to the third and final nation, Nostradamus may have foreseen, pause, and reflect. Is it possible that Turkey's future still hangs in the balance and that our attention, our understanding, might somehow shape what happens next? Let us know what you think, because your voice matters in this shared journey of wisdom. If you've watched up to this point, here's something we'd love for you to share in the comments. Do you believe that Turkey is not just facing political and natural challenges, but also a deeper spiritual crisis, loss of identity, truth, and balance? If your heart says yes, just type, "Yes, the veil is real." Let's bring our voices together and reflect with compassion, not judgment. 3. China, land of silk and red tide. The final and perhaps most debated part of Nostradamus's prophecy brings us to the nation often referred to as the land of silk, China. In a haunting verse, he wrote, "The mirror cracks in the land of silk. Dragon's breath scorches its kin. The red tide rises, but finds no shore to call its own." At first glance, these lines sound like poetic metaphor, but when viewed through the lens of today's global and internal challenges, the meaning becomes startlingly relevant. China, for decades seen as a rising superpower, now finds itself confronting a growing list of internal pressures that threaten to fracture the very image it projects to the world. The mirror cracking could reflect a breaking illusion, a society long seen as stable and united, now beginning to show visible strain. A major concern is the country's demographic crisis, a population that is aging rapidly, with fewer young people to support the elderly or drive the economy forward. This is not a distant forecast, it's happening now. Economic slowdowns are no longer hidden in data, they're becoming part of daily life for Chinese citizens. Real estate markets have built massive, gleaming cities that remain largely empty, known today as ghost city, symbols of ambition outpacing reality. And as unemployment among youth rises, frustration simmers quietly beneath the surface. The phrase, "dragon's breath scorches its skin," may suggest more than economic trouble. It could point to the ways in which the state tightens its grip on its people through surveillance, censorship, and the suppression of free thought. The dragon, a traditional symbol of China, turning on its own, could represent the growing tension between state control and individual freedom. In recent years, we've seen protests in Hong Kong, concern over Taiwan, and increased tension in the South China Sea areas that hint at both domestic unrest and external conflict. But what happens when frustration at home reaches a boiling point? Could this dragon face pressure not from rival nations, but from its own citizens demanding change? That's where the final line, "The red tide rises but finds no shore to call its own," offers its most powerful warning. The red tide, often interpreted as a symbol of ideological expansion or nationalism, may be rising with intention, but without true direction or support. Attempts to extend influence across borders could backfire, leaving the nation not strengthened, but isolated both economically and diplomatically. And when a powerful nation becomes misunderstood or disconnected from the global community, the consequences ripple across the world. In our modern lives, it's easy to view such large-scale changes as distant or unrelated to us. But history has shown that when great powers stumble, the effects reach far beyond their borders. The Buddha once said, "An insincere and evil friend is more to be feared than a wild beast." This speaks not only to individual relationships, but to nations deceiving themselves as turning a blind eye to truth in favor of pride or control. So we must ask, is the red tide a force that will shape the future, or is it rising too fast to find its place? As we look ahead to the end of 2025, let us reflect on what these warnings really mean. They are not just about nations, they are about all of us. What happens to truth when it is ignored? What happens to unity when fear becomes the loudest voice? And most importantly, what can we learn from these ancient words to help build a more peaceful and compassionate world today? Number 3. Shared patterns among the three nations. As we take a step back and reflect on the three nations Nostradamus may have warned about, the United States, Turkey, and China, it's important to ask, what do they have in common, and why might they be part of the same prophecy? At first glance, these countries seem vastly different in culture, history, and belief systems, but when we look deeper, a clear and unsettling pattern begins to emerge. Each of these nations holds significant influence in today's world, whether through military strength, cultural reach, economic power, or geographical importance. They are not just countries on a map, they are pillars of the current global order. And yet, despite their might, each of them is quietly battling something much deeper than external threats: internal fragmentation. Within the United States, political polarization and cultural division have fractured social unity. In Turkey, rising authoritarianism and economic instability have created tension between modern ideals and historical identity. And in China, behind its outward display of power lies growing unrest fueled by economic pressure, demographic shifts, and an increasingly surveilled society. These are not surface-level challenges. They strike at the heart of national cohesion socially, politically, and even spiritually. And that leads us to one of the most symbolic and perhaps prophetic connections. Each of these countries lies on or near a major fault line, either literally beneath their feet or symbolically beneath their stability. For the US, the San Andreas and New Madrid faults are real geological threats, but the deeper fault lines are ideological. Turkey sits along the North Anatolian Fault, with earthquake warnings growing louder each year, while its political ground seems just as unstable. China, though known more for its economic might, faces a figurative fault line of unrest, misinformation, and mounting discontent. Nostradamus's prophecies, when read carefully, don't just speak of war or sudden collapse. They whisper of something far more subtle and dangerous: spiritual entropy, a slow unraveling of values, identity, and national purpose. A kind of decay that doesn't explode, but erodes quietly until the structure no longer holds. This is what makes these predictions so relevant today, not because they forecast dramatic endings, but because they challenge us to look at the present with honest eyes. As the Buddha wisely said, "You yourself must strive, the Buddhas only point the way." So we must ask ourselves, are we seeing signs not of fate, but of choices left unmade, conversations left unfinished, and truths left unspoken? What happens when a nation no longer remembers what holds it together, when fear becomes more powerful than trust, or when survival replaces meaning? These are not just questions for presidents or policymakers, they are questions for all of us. Because the health of a nation begins with the heart of its people. As you listen and reflect, consider this. Could these prophecies be invitations, not to fear, but to awareness? Are we being called not to wait for collapse, but to rebuild from within before the fault lines grow wider? Let us not forget, with our thoughts, we make the world. What kind of world are we shaping today? Number 4. Mysterious Fourth Nation. As we explore the final and perhaps most mysterious layer of Nostradamus's warning, there is a recurring reference in lesser-known manuscripts to a fourth nationon that does not stand alongside the major powers like the United States, Turkey, or China, but instead emerges quietly, signaling the final stage of a much broader unraveling. This nation is never directly named, adding to the sense of uncertainty and caution that surrounds it. Instead, Nostradamus leaves behind a cryptic trail of symbols, meant not to provide certainty, but to provoke awareness. He writes of a mountain split in two, which many interpret as a violent, natural or political division, perhaps a literal geological fracture, but just as likely a deep ideological or cultural rupture that divides a nation's people beyond repair. Then there is a lion with no roar, a powerful image of a country that once held pride, influence or strength, but has since been silenced, forgotten, or stripped of its voice on the global stage. This could suggest a fading monarchy, a lost identity, or a leadership that no longer inspires. Finally, perhaps most evocative, is the image of a frozen crown melting into the sea, which some interpret as a once stable leadership or legacy, now dissolving due to climate, chaos, or crisis. Could this point to a northern country, known for cold climates, traditions of royalty, or even a symbolic crown of influence that is now being swept away by rising seas, political instability, or environmental collapse? While scholars continue to debate which nation this might be, some suggesting Arctic bordering regions, others considering island nations or smaller European states, what stands out most is not the identity of the country itself, but its symbolic role. It serves as a final warning not of destruction from outside forces, but of erosion from within, unnoticed until it's too late. In modern life, it's easy to ignore the so-called smaller players on the world stage, but history teaches us that great shifts often begin in the most overlooked places. Whether through environmental disaster, economic collapse, or a silent cultural shift, even a seemingly minor event can trigger global consequences. So as we reflect on this fourth mystery, we are reminded of the Buddha's words. The trouble is, you think you have time. What are we putting off? What fractures are we pretending don't exist in our own communities or countries? And what happens when those we thought were too small to matter become the spark that ignites broader change? This part of Nostradamus's prophecy isn't meant to inspire fear, it's meant to inspire vigilance, humility, and compassion. If a mountain can split, a lion can be silenced, and a crown can melt, then perhaps the most important message is this: power is not permanent, and neither is silence. The question for each of us is, are we listening closely enough to the quiet signs before they become thunder? And more importantly, what can we do right now to bring more unity, more awareness, and more peace into the world we share? If this message resonates with you, we invite you to leave a simple comment. The quiet signs are speaking. It's a gentle reminder that even the smallest shifts matter, and that awareness is the first step toward change. Let's share this moment of reflection together with open hearts and mindful presence. Number 5. Advice for listeners. After hearing and reflecting on the mysterious prophecies of Nostradamus and how they seem to align with many unsettling signs in our modern world, it's natural to feel a sense of uncertainty. Questions swirl in our minds. Could these predictions really be unfolding before our eyes? What if they are? But perhaps the deeper, more important question isn't whether these forecasts will come true, but rather, how will we choose to live from this moment onward? The 3 countries referenced in his writings, regardless of whether they are world superpowers or smaller, less prominent nations, carry something in common that we must all take seriously: a slow unraveling that begins not with bombs or invasions, but with a subtle breakdown within. And this, in many ways, mirrors our own lives. Societal collapse rarely starts at the top. More often, it starts in the hearts and minds of individuals who've become disconnected from understanding, empathy, and awareness. It starts when compassion is replaced with suspicion, when mindfulness is replaced with distraction, and when people stop seeing each other as part of one shared humanity. There's a deep wisdom in the words of the Buddha that speaks directly to this moment. The mind is the forerunner of all things. With our thoughts, we make the world. If we act with an impure mind, suffering follows, just as the wheel follows the ox that pulls the cart. When we see anger and division playing out on the world stage, it's easy to point fingers or feel powerless. But the truth is, we always have a choice. The outer world is a reflection of the inner world, and real transformation begins when we turn inward and ask, what am I feeding with my thoughts? Am I cultivating peace or fueling conflict? Every conversation, every reaction, every decision becomes an opportunity to shape the world, not just the one out there, but the one right here, within ourselves. So ask yourself honestly, in the rhythm of your daily life, are your words helping to heal or to harm? Are your actions rooted in awareness, or are they driven by fear and impulse? Are you responding to challenges with calm or with blame? It's easy to forget in times of crisis, but our everyday behavior, how we speak to a neighbor, how we listen to someone with different beliefs, how we respond when things don't go our way, all of it contributes to the collective energy of the society we live in. And when enough people fall into anger, judgment, and self-centeredness, a kind of spiritual erosion begins, quiet but dangerous. But if just as many people choose instead to live mindfully, to act with compassion, and to care for one another, then those same cracks can begin to heal. The big changes we long for don't always arrive through governments or global events. More often, they begin at home in the simple ways we choose to live and relate to one another. That's why we cannot wait for miracles or for someone else to save the world. Real change begins in the present moment, with the person looking back at us in the mirror. Start by being the calm in a chaotic world. Let your voice be one that does not stir division but offers peace. Let your hands do work that uplifts rather than harms. Let your heart stay soft and grateful, even in the face of uncertainty. Simplify your life not out of fear, but out of clarity. Live not just for yourself, but with a sense of responsibility toward the earth, toward your community, and toward your own inner stability. Because when the world feels like it's falling apart, what we most need are not more opinions, but more people who are centered, wise, and kind. The Buddha reminded us with another timeless truth. Greater than conquering 1,000 enemies in battle is the one who conquers himself. And in these uncertain times, that inner victory matters more than ever. The one who can tame their anger, overcome their fear, and stay grounded in love becomes a guiding light, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. So rather than fearing a future that hasn't yet arrived, choose to live fully today. Bring gentleness to your thoughts. Let go of bitterness. Speak words that build, not break. And take action, small as they may seem, that move the world in a better direction. Because even if the prophecy holds some truth, it is not here to paralyze us with fear, but to awaken us to what truly matters. In the end, we must remember that it's not the prophecy that writes the future, it's us. Each day, each decision, each moment of kindness or clarity shapes the path forward. So instead of getting lost in what might happen, let's focus on who we are becoming. Let us choose to be the peace we wish to see, the healing we hope for, and the strength our world so deeply needs. As we've explored the haunting verses of Nostradamus and their possible reflections in today's world, one truth stands clear: our future is not fixed by prophecy, but shaped by awareness, compassion, and the choices we make each day. Whether these predictions come true or not, the deeper question is, what kind of world are we building within ourselves and together? If this video gave you new insight or a moment of reflection, we invite you to walk this path of wisdom with us. Please like, share, and subscribe to The Journey of Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos, each one crafted to awaken thought, deepen understanding, and bring clarity in uncertain times. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay mindful, stay compassionate, and never stop seeking the truth beneath the noise.